Valheim. The first time a falling tree instantly crushes your skull, you realize this isn't a normal Viking fantasy. You were literally dropped into purgatory by a giant bird and told to figure it out. The building physics are entirely structurally sound, meaning your massive mead hall will collapse if you don't actually support the roof. Plus, if you don't build a chimney, you will suffocate on your own campfire smoke. The combat can feel a little floaty at times, but weathering a massive ocean storm on a tiny raft with your friends while a sea serpent chases you is pure panic. You play this to conquer a hostile world that actively hates you. Subnautica. Most games want you to look up at the stars. Here, looking down is the most terrifying thing you can possibly do. What begins as catching cute alien fish quickly spirals into a fight against crippling thalassophia. You end up constructing elaborate underwater research facilities just to have a safe place to hide from leviathans roaring in the pitch-black water. The pop-in on console can be brutal, but the sheer relief of hearing your base hatch close behind you is unmatched. You will eventually build a massive submarine, only to realize you have to pilot it into even darker trenches. Project Zomboid. Nobody warned me that reading a book while leaving the oven on could burn down my entire neighborhood. The game literally tells you right away that this is the story of how you died. You don't win, you just try to delay the inevitable by barricading windows, managing your depression by eating stale chips, and desperately trying to find a working car battery. The UI takes actual hours to wrap your head around, but the moment you successfully hotwire a van and escape a massive horde of the undead, you feel like a true apocalypse veteran. Dune Awakening. Imagine waking up on a planet where the sun is actively trying to kill you before you even find water. Getting caught in a sandstorm doesn't just lower your health, it completely strips the flesh from your bones. You spend your early hours just trying to maintain your stillsuit and hiding in the shadows of giant rocks. The political faction system means you aren't just fighting the environment, you are fighting other players for spice blows. Getting a massive ornithopter off the ground requires actual coordination. Surviving Icarus feels less like a game and more like a massive accomplishment. Grounded, too. Being shrunk down to the size of a bug turns a regular suburban backyard into an absolute nightmare. A single drop of dew becomes a massive resource, and an ordinary wolf spider becomes a raid boss that will stalk you through the grass. The sheer scale of everything makes building a base out of grass planks and dandelion stems feel incredibly rewarding. The combat blocking system has a steeper learning curve than you might expect, but when you finally craft armor out of the very insects that used to terrorize you, the power trip is entirely worth it. The Forest. The moment I realized the cannibals were just watching me from the tree line instead of attacking, I knew I was in trouble. They test your defenses, figure out your patrol routes, and sometimes just scream at you before running away. You crash land on a peninsula and have to build fortified camps while slowly losing your mind. The cave systems are so claustrophobic and dark that you will actively avoid going into them. You can eventually build traps and effigies to scare them off, turning yourself into the real monster on the island. Sons of the Forest. For reasons I still don't understand, having a brain-damaged companion named Kelvin blindly chop down trees while I build a log cabin is incredibly relaxing, until a mutant with entirely too many limbs vaults over your defensive wall. The building system here lets you manually chop, split, and place every single log, creating some of the most satisfying cabin construction in gaming. The story gets extremely weird and cuts off abruptly, but assembling an arsenal of modern weapons to fight off cannibals while riding a golf cart through the woods is pure chaos. Enshrouded. You can literally dig a massive hole into the side of a mountain and build an entire dwarven kingdom inside of it. The voxel-based building is so precise that you can remove individual bricks to make windows, but below your beautiful mountain home is a deadly fog that will suffocate you if you stay in it too long. The skill tree can feel a bit overwhelming at first, but unlocking the glider and soaring over the ruined architecture feels incredible. You slowly become a magical architect, reclaiming a dead world from the mist. Core Keeper. Dropping into a pitch-black cavern with nothing but a wooden pickaxe quickly turns into building a sprawling automated factory. You dig through dirt walls, discover ancient ruins, and suddenly find yourself fighting giant slime bosses. The progression is insanely smooth. You go from eating raw mushrooms in the dark to laying down railway tracks and setting up automated drills to mine ore while you sleep. The inventory management gets a bit tedious later, but decorating a cozy underground base while ancient machines hum in the background is extremely satisfying. Abiotic Factor. Taking the role of an underpaid scientist trapped in an underground research facility during a massive dimensional breach is brilliant. You are not a super soldier. You defend yourself by taping knives to spears and throwing office supplies at alien creatures. You can steal water coolers and vending machines to decorate your makeshift cafeteria base. The map layout is confusing, and getting lost is a guarantee, but playing this with friends and accidentally blowing up a hallway while trying to cook soup on a space eater is the exact kind of disaster I want. V-Rising. Being a vampire doesn't mean much if you get immediately vaporized by stepping into the sunlight. You have to constantly stick to the shadows, running from tree to tree just to survive the daytime. You build massive gothic castles, not just for looks, but to refine materials and process human blood types for specific buffs. The boss fights are basically bullet hell encounters that will absolutely test your patience. Eventually, you dominate local villages and force humans to serve in your castle, feeling like a true lord of the night. Raft. Floating on a tiny square of plastic in the middle of a massive ocean sounds boring until a giant shark eats your only water purifier. You use a plastic hook to pull debris out of the water, slowly expanding your floating trash pile into a mega-level mega-yacht. Managing food and water is a constant panic in the early game. The island exploration can feel a bit repetitive over time, but painting your massive floating fortress and placing a hammock on the top deck makes the early struggles completely worth the effort. Don't starve together. The funniest part is that the dark will literally kill you if you do not build a fire in time. The art style looks like a creepy children's book, but the survival mechanics are absolutely ruthless. You have to manage your hunger, your health, and your sanity. If your sanity drops too low, the shadows turn into physical monsters and attack you. Public servers are usually complete chaos, and you will die a lot. But perfectly optimizing a camp and surviving the brutal winter season feels like you beat the system. Necesse. I still have no idea why the developers added a full colony management system to a top-down action game, but it works perfectly. You explore procedurally generated islands and fight bosses, but you can also recruit villagers to automate your entire base. They will farm, craft, and sort your chests while you're out fighting pirates. The graphics are extremely simple and might turn some people off. However, returning to a thriving town that practically runs itself while you focus entirely on upgrading your gear is deeply rewarding. Soulmask. Controlling a tribe doesn't mean just giving orders. You can literally take over the bodies of your tribesmen to use their specific skills. You start with nothing, but as you collect different ancient masks, you unlock insane combat abilities and management tools. The amount of menus you have to navigate to set up work orders is definitely overwhelming, but customizing an entire settlement where every single person is working in perfect unison gives you an absurd sense of power. Keplerth. Waking up in an alien pod is a standard sci-fi trope, but genetically modifying yourself with monster DNA to survive certainly isn't. You gather resources, build a farm, and explore endless underground layers. The true fun comes from capturing aggressive alien wildlife and breeding them into massive combat pets. The combat animations are pretty stiff and simplistic, yet the sheer amount of customization for your character and your base makes this incredibly hard to put down once you figure out the basics. Icarus. Most games want you to build a permanent home. Here you drop from orbit onto a hostile planet, gather exotic matter, and extract before the timer runs out. If you miss your extract, your character is permanently gone. You build elaborate wooden shelters only to watch a lightning storm set the entire thing on fire. The performance drops heavily when the weather gets intense. The rush of barely making it back to your drop pod with a backpack full of rare resources is a massive adrenaline spike. Smalland survive the wilds. A small puddle becomes a massive deadly lake when you're only a few inches tall. You scale giant trees to claim territory and build safe havens high above the dangerous forest floor. Taming a grasshopper to use as a massive jumping mount completely changes how you explore the map. The combat can be heavily stamina dependent and a bit frustrating, but surviving a massive downpour by hiding under a single leaf gives you an incredible sense of scale. Vintage story. You'll spend an hour just trying to properly shape a rock into a knife. This game takes primitive survival to a terrifying level of detail. You don't just smelt ore, you build clay molds, fire them in a pit, and pour molten copper by hand. The learning curve is practically a vertical cliff, and the game does very little to help you. But finally baking a loaf of bread to survive the harsh, freezing winter gives you a sense of accomplishment most games can never replicate. Palworld. I genuinely wasn't expecting to run a fully operational munitions factory powered by depressed electric sheep. You catch cute monsters, but instead of just fighting in gyms, you force them to nime assault rifles and force them to mine ore while you build a massive fortress. It sounds completely ridiculous until you try it, and somehow this became my entire weekend. The base building can get extremely janky on uneven terrain, but flying over a mountain on a fire